So I'm Beth Kelly, I'm the chair of ALM, and I want to say welcome to everybody. And thank you so much for attending our third virtual seminar series in this current year. I'm going to pass you over to Kees Hoogland, who has worked with our speaker tonight, Iddo Gal, for a long time. And so I thought he could do Iddo justice.
It's for me a big honor to introduce Iddo. In the announcement, of course, of this seminar, you already can read that Iddo is an associate professor, retired now from Haifa University in Israel. Really a lot of things, and is very influential in adult mathematics, adult numeracy, and adult statistics. He's a prolific writer, written a lot of articles, books, and reports. He's still very active at the conceptual part of this wonderful field. And we are very happy and very honored to have him here to contribute to our virtual seminars. And I'm really looking forward to it. What every numeracy educator working with young adults should know about civic statistics. And I quickly give the word to you, Iddo, because everyone is looking forward to what you have to say about
it. Well, thank you, Kees, and Kees, thank you, Beth. I hope you can hear me well. Let me share my screen and then make some introductory remarks. So first of all, thanks for the invitation to speak. I am glad also that the collaboration with the International Association for Statistical Education worked out, and that we could manage to co-sponsor this event. I think that the topic deserves it. The topic speaks to multiple audiences, as I will explain in a moment. So this time I'm not going to talk about my own work, but about results of joint work that I will describe in a moment. And I think that some of my colleagues from the project that led to it, Civic Stat, are also here. And so my plan is to say a few relatively short words about civic statistics. I have been talking about it, we have been talking about it for 5 or 6 years in multiple conferences. So I will try to summarize some points, present some new material and some ideas, and try to speak to the multiple communities that are present here tonight. So we'll start about civic statistics, then we will do a short activity in breakout rooms in about 10 minutes. So I am alerting you ahead of time that you will be moved to a breakout room with 6 people or so. So get ready to be seen on camera, or if you do not want to open your camera, still be active in the breakout room later on for a few moments. Then we will come back, we will look at some more examples, and then we will talk about where to find resources and materials and information about civic statistics. It is a very broad topic. I'm going to only visit it briefly today. And at the end, I will try to make some recommendations and talk about implications for research, because both some of the members of ALM and some of the people that are interested in statistics education are also interested in research issues. And the plan is to have about 15-20 minutes of an open discussion at the end. So let me start by saying that statistics education, or learning of statistics, is something that is of interest to multiple communities that are represented here. So of course, within adult numeracy education, which by itself is a diverse area with multiple types of activities and settings for teaching and learning, within this arena, there are some people that are interested in teaching statistics and include it in adult education classes. Of course, the community interested in statistics education is interested in statistical learning, but there are quite big differences between how it is taught at a university level and at the school level, where at the school level in some countries it is within mathematics education, sometimes in science education, there are some standalone statistics classes and so on. And there are sub-communities interested in quantitative reasoning and quantitative literacy, especially in the United States. And some statistics comes up in other types of education, in non-formal settings, such as health education, financial education, and so on. So the area is very broad, and I will try to speak to all of these communities in some shape or form. But please understand if some of the points that are being made seem to be less relevant for your immediate teaching or research environment, but still I think would be valuable to keep in mind. And as usual, I will try to be provocative because there's no point in just regurgitating things. I want to say things that will spark you to think about things. So I may go for the extreme in some cases in order to keep things alive. So let me start by saying that we have a tradition of teaching statistics, and I will take as the core what is being taught at the introductory statistics level, at the college level, in many universities around the world, but much of it is also of relevance to numeracy education in adult learning context and to school mathematics. So when we ask yourself, what do people learn at the university level in introductory statistics courses? Usually we talk a little bit about why we need statistics and why we need data and something about the scientific method. We talk about different ways of collecting data, maybe surveys, maybe experiments, how to conduct, how to construct a questionnaire, different ways to describe data visually and computationally by way of computing the mean or the median, standard deviations, and so on. Some people talk about probability, formally or informally on different levels. Usually there is some discussion about relationships or association between variables by visual means through looking at tables and by computation of correlations and maybe simple regressions. And there may be some discussion of inference, formal or informal rules of inference, and on occasion, some things about reporting statistical results. This is the core. Around it, there are some variations. Of course, not everybody is doing it in exactly this sequence. Sometimes people go further, but this is more or less what has been taught for many, many years in many contexts. And in adult education, in adult numeracy education, usually we don't have time, class time to teach all of this, but we touch on some of the issues in some shape or form. So the big question is this tradition still okay? Is this okay to continue and teach this more or less in this sequence? Is it aligned with the actual statistical messages in the news? And when I say messages in the news, most of the examples that I will give today are based on what appears in newspapers, but we all know that the news now comes to people through many different channels. So you may watch television and hear a lot of commentators and people speaking, verbally presenting things. If you've listened to any television-based news regarding COVID or the coronavirus, you've heard a lot of experts talk in this way. We consume the news through podcasts, through Facebook, through Twitter, through a whole bunch of additional channels. So it's not just print-based, but I'm going to give examples that are print-based just because it is easier to demonstrate things when you give a Zoom lecture. So let's talk a little bit about civic statistics. So this is not a familiar term. The group that I will describe in a moment more or less coined this term and try to describe its characteristics, although some other people talked about social statistics, of course, well before us. So what are civic statistics? Civic statistics are statistics about social and economic topics that are hot, that are burning, that are important to society and affect individuals as well. They may involve social policy, that is, politicians and policymakers make decisions, allocate budgets, fight over how much to allocate for different kinds of purposes, and they have to monitor what's going on, and this is where the statistics comes in. And so you have before you a list of typical civic statistics topics or areas, but there are some others. So the three on the left, health, global warming, and migration, are usually considered disruptors. They disrupt things when they don't work very well, or when there is kind of an inflammation or something is going in a different way. And we've seen it with COVID. We are seeing it with global warming. And unfortunately, we are also seeing a huge new wave of migration or immigration or refugees right now in Europe because of the war, the Russian aggression against Ukraine. And so I also wrote war, even though this is not a concept that is officially part of civic statistics. And we have a whole bunch of additional very important topics. And in each one of them, there are separate policies and separate laws and regulations and separate methods for collecting information, quantitative information and statistics. And they are being reported to the public in different shapes. And throughout the year. So a few years ago, a group of us, mainly from the area of statistics education, we got together to think about civic statistics and to what extent we can improve how people engage with civic statistics. Because we were concerned that they have some unique features or characteristics that are not being met by regular instruction in statistics and mathematics. So we put together a partnership made up of teams from 6 universities in 5 countries that are listed here. I'm not going to name the names of all the individuals. It will take me too long, but these are people who are involved in mathematics and statistics education. We have some people who are former or current teachers in different schools and some people involved in adult education, a couple of people that touch on official statistics. So a very diverse group. We got very nice funding from the European Commission or European Union through the Erasmus Plus program, and we started working. And we called our project Civic Stat. We finished a couple of years ago, but we are still very active. There are a lot of materials that we have put on the website of the International Association for Statistical Education. If you just write Civic Stat, it will take you there from any search engine. We are about to issue a new book that is delayed a little bit, but will come from Springer in a few months. And we'll have 23 chapters that are supposed to work like a textbook in a way. So it's not a regular edited book about results of research, but it is geared for instruction and to help instruction and teaching on different levels. So it is full of materials and lesson plans and activities and things like this. So this was at the level of marketing what we have done. Now let's get down to business. So I'm going to show you a few examples from different countries in different languages. This is from my home country, Israel. By the way, this is in Hebrew. You read Hebrew from right to left, not from left to right. Okay. So these are 2 things that came this week. On the right, you have the most well-known magazine for women in Israel. It's called Laisha, for women. And last week, we had the International Women's Day that was marked, I think, in all countries, and they had a special issue. And the cover says, we took away 3% from the cover. Isn't it strange? What is really strange is that at the year 2022, the average wages for women is 30% lower than for men. And we will look at an article inside that talks about pay gaps and so on. And on the left, you have the daily newspaper, the largest circulation newspaper from Israel, talking about the war in Ukraine and discussing refugees and so on. So we have these kinds of civic statistics topics everywhere. They come sometimes in more or less the same way, sometimes in different ways in different countries. So our goal is to try and improve citizens' engagement with evidence, with quantitative evidence or quantifiable evidence, and improve decisions in democratic societies, both personal decisions and community or public decisions. And the problem that we have seen some years ago is that despite the importance of civic statistics for all democratic societies, civic statistics topics are not really addressed in a systematic way in statistics education. That is the hope of those who teach statistics traditionally, is that we will teach whatever we've been teaching for 50 or 60 years, more or less, even though we've improved it with some technology and so on, and that people will find a way to transfer the knowledge and apply it to new kinds of problems. And somewhat provocatively, but not so somewhat provocatively, we want to argue that we don't think that this is going to work because civic statistics deserves special attention. This is a challenge that we all face in adult education, in colleges, and in schools. So my goal today is to try and show you some examples, get you to think about things, and share some insights and some resources that we have that may help in this. But we have just started this journey, and there is much more that can be done. And so we hope, of course, that other people will join this effort and will continue to produce materials, will critique what we are doing and produce new and better things, and so on and so forth. So I would like to go for a few moments into breakout rooms and give you a task to work on. So I will give you some text about poverty taken from Wikipedia. There are Wikipedias in many different languages, so many people in many countries have access to Wikipedia. And the reason I give some material from Wikipedia is because very often educators and citizens alike rely on it when they try to understand something and they are looking for quick information that will educate them about a new topic. And so a citizen that doesn't know enough about poverty or wages or wage gaps or many other issues may go to Wikipedia for information, and teachers do it and students do it very often as well. And so I will give you a little bit of text from Wikipedia about poverty, and I will ask you to think about some questions that will appear on a slide. So when you go into the breakout rooms in a moment, you will see this text and there are questions on the bottom, and you have 8 minutes. So what I ask you to do is to open your camera or activate your microphone when you go into the breakout room, read the text, and then try to discuss your thoughts about it. You don't have a lot of time. You need to be brief. You don't have a chance for long introductions. Just start to talk about it, and the idea is to experience and engage a little bit with something that connects with civic statistics. So look, in an ideal world, if I was with you in a room, I would have talk to you, and we would work in small groups, and we will write things on a board, and we will make a list of all the different points that appeared in the presentation, and we would try to discuss and debate some things. So we don't have this opportunity, but my goal was to try and show you that important information that has complex statistics has to be communicated to the public and to students as well about a phenomenon that is very important in all countries, including in industrialized and high-income countries, as well as many other countries. And it is communicated through text, not through equations and so on. It has terminologies that are different than what we normally see in a statistics class. It might be terms such as absolute poverty or relative poverty. It might be the description of a distribution in the last paragraph through a grouping of a continuous distribution of income into some groups that have special meaning, and reference to minimum level or average things and so on. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. If we would have looked at the actual definition of poverty on Wikipedia, you will see much more information and more statistical and mathematical terminologies. And I hope that you agree that this has educational value, but it does not necessarily fit very well into a standard statistical curriculum. We need to make decisions about how to tie it in. What of this we can teach, what of this we can tell students that it exists and let them discover it on their own. We have to make a lot of choices in this regard. And so let me move on with some additional details about civic statistics and about the conceptual frameworks that we have developed in this regard. So first of all, we said that we want to improve citizens' ability to engage with evidence. Okay, from an educational perspective, when we think of learners, adults or college students or high school students, we are thinking about enabling learners or graduates to engage with civic statistics in the classroom, hoping that when they graduate, after they finish, they will be able to act as smart consumers, as active consumers, as numerate adults. So what is engagement? Engagement is a psychological term. It is not a statistical or a mathematical term. It is a psychological term that combines cognitions, dispositions, and some actions. When you engage with something, think of engagement between individuals who are engaging in order to get married. Okay, so what is the engagement signify? It means that you care about something, that you are sensitive to nuances, that you're interested in the topic. So there is a motivational and attitudinal aspect. It means that you examine things and collect information in order to educate yourself about a topic. It means that you wonder about things. You don't take things for granted. You ask questions, you reflect, you critique, and you want to expand your understanding of what is going on. Okay, and eventually the idea is that engagement leads to action. It is a motivational construct and it leads to action, and actual engaging with the topic means that you take actions and you do things that seem relevant to you. And so when we think of helping students to engage with civic statistics, the topics that are involved in civic statistics are not necessarily trivial, understood, or of interest to students. It might be poverty, it might be health, it might be wages. Not all students or learners are interested in all of them, and we need to think about these issues. So in the project ProCivicStat, we have analyzed the features of civic statistics as they appear in various media channels, especially printed and digital sources. So we have looked at hundreds of media items and reports from official statistics agencies and press releases and other kinds of things, conducted literature reviews, and from this we have distilled the list of features of civic statistics. Originally, we had 6 simple ones. Recently, Joachim Engel, who is on this call, and Jim Ridgway did some further work and came up with an expanded list of 12 features, and I'm listing here 7 of them, and I will try to illustrate them very briefly through some additional examples. So the first and most important feature of civic statistics, and we've seen only one example so far for this, the first and most important feature of civic statistics is that civic statistics deal with social issues, with things that are meaningful for society, with things that have consequences for society. So the statistics focus on things that have social meaning and personal meaning for individuals. And I emphasize this because a lot of the statistics that we teach, and even the mathematics that we teach, quite often may not touch on issues that have personal meanings for learners. And they often ask, so why do we need to learn this stuff? When will we ever use this stuff? So they don't see the connection between what is happening in the classroom and the outside world. But civic statistics touch on social issues. Next, most civic statistics are multivariate, they are not univariate. They involve many variables. There are interactions between these variables, and many of these interactions are non-linear. So these are not simplified variables like many of those that we explore in the classroom. Very often, these civic statistics are aggregated in different ways. For example, by the use of indicators, such as the consumer price index, child mortality index, productivity indices, and so on and so forth. So an indicator is an aggregated measure, and we will talk about it later on. Civic statistics very often are aggregated in the sense that they are reported for subgroups, or they're reported in terms of their connection to different causal factors that may affect them in some ways, may influence them. Civic statistics are dynamic. They do not stay the same. They are not the same like one-shot surveys, because the poverty statistics change every year, maybe a little bit, maybe a lot. The health statistics change every year, maybe a little, maybe a lot. They may change for different individuals, they may change over time, they may change over geographical units. So we are dealing with statistics. They need to be compared over time and need to be treated as a dynamic entity. And many civic statistics, not all of them, come from multiple sources. When students learn of a survey, usually they learn of a single source of information. There is a survey and we run it and people answer a questionnaire and we get answers and that's it. But most civic statistics rely on information that flows from multiple channels, sometimes from big data channels, sometimes from a combination of surveys, administrative data, and other kinds of sources. And if you've followed any of the articles about COVID in your country, you know that information about how many people died comes from different hospitals, from different reports. Sometimes they get questions and so on and so forth. Finally, civic statistics are communicated via very different kinds of text that are very diverse, or they are embedded in text. That is, they are not communicated necessarily through graphs or through charts or through tables, but through words. Just think of a television broadcast and different commentators or experts or a health official talking about something. So they communicate statistics through verbal text, oral text. And sometimes they are communicated through different kinds of visualizations. Some of them are static, some of them are dynamic. Let me just note in passing that many of these features are also of interest in the area of data science. One of the things that set apart regular statistics from data science is that in data science, we try to educate future data scientists that information is multivariate, multi-source, changes over time, and so on and so forth. So you need to get ready for a more dynamic world than before. And there are additional features, but this is sufficient to suggest that civic statistics have some unique features. Now I want to illustrate some of these through examples. Start with the example that I looked at earlier, and then move to a few other selected examples. And as we know, by the way, few examples cannot illustrate such a wide field. I'm selecting very carefully a few examples to illustrate some points, but of course, they will have some limitations. So we already talked about this article in the women's magazine in Israel. This is a very popular magazine. Even I receive it, my wife receives it. And so we talked about the statement that appears here. We cut 30% of the front page of the magazine because women get 30% less than men. By the way, this statement is wrong. It is flatly incorrect. And I will show in a moment why. It's not that women make more money than men, but the statement from a statistical perspective is inaccurate, to say it mildly. So this is one of the lead articles that talks about this argument that women make less than men. Again, this is in Hebrew. You read it from right to left. So you see the header on the right. How come that in 2022, women still make 1/3 less than men? It is expressed in words. Then it starts by saying there are many reasons for this. But there are some reasons for optimism, and then it continues with text. And this is how it continues. Can anybody see any statistics? Can you see any graphs? Can you see any charts? Can you see any tables? No, because all of the important statistics are embedded in text. And some of them are really complex. So there are different interviews with different experts who talk about results of different studies and sociological findings and comparisons of different subgroups in society and so on and so forth. But everything is communicated through text. A lot of it is through the text at the bottom in different colors, in brown and blue. So let's look at one of these. So you have the Hebrew at the bottom and the translation to English at the top. So the Hebrew says
some difference in the level of the coins which the men and women are sitting on. That may be a kind of a graph.
Sorry, Marika, can you mute your microphone? So in the public sector, women in ages 45 and above are overrepresented, double the rate in the general workforce, but they earn 60 to 75% less than men in the same age group. So first of all, you see here a comparison of subgroups. You see here the usage of percents and proportional terms in ways that are never encountered in a statistics class. I've taught statistics for many years, and I've talked to many people who teach statistics. We never communicated in this way. So this is just an example for how a complex pattern is communicated through text, and readers are expected to understand it. And they do not have access to the actual data. They need to find it themselves if they're interested in it. And of course, this is incorrect from a statistical perspective because it does not really deal with the fact that this is not how a pay gap is calculated. So again, if you want to understand, so now I'm a citizen, I'm reading this article, I want to know more about how wage gaps or pay gaps are calculated and what's going on in the world. I type gender pay gap, I come to Wikipedia, and this is what I encounter. There is text, and I want to show you some of the text. So the gender pay gap is the average difference between the remuneration for working men and women. Generally, women are considered to be paid less than men. Okay, there are two distinct numbers regarding pay gap: non-adjusted and adjusted pay gap. The latter typically takes into account differences in hours worked, part-time versus full-time, occupation chosen, job experience, and so on. Now look at this in the USA, for example, the non-adjusted average is really 75% of the salary of men, but once you adjust it, it climbs to 95%. Okay, so the 30% that was reported for Israel is probably a non-adjusted rate, but nobody said it. Nobody explained how this is compared, and the differences are really, really big. Okay, and in the last paragraph, you see some of the social implications, why this is important. Why is it of interest and of concern that women get paid less than men? Because it has to do with the fairness of the remuneration, how much money they will get when they get older, their ability to support single family homes, and so on and so forth. There is much more information on Wikipedia itself. So again, we see the dependence on text, the understanding of text, and the need for people to be able to deal with a lot of terms that come from official statistics. And by the way, standard statistics instruction never really teaches anything from official statistics. I will skip this for lack of time. Let's look at an additional example or a couple of examples that relate to multivariate, aggregated, dynamic, multi-source, and so on. So here is an example in Portuguese. It comes from Brazil. I prepared it when I gave a lecture to a Brazilian audience some month ago on statistical literacy. The translation to English is in red at the bottom. It relates to one of the Brazilian states, actually the largest Brazilian state, Minas Gerais. talking about global warming, miniature ice with heat from the northeast. Projections indicate effects of global warming. Okay, estimates based on a UN worst case scenario indicate that cities in miniature ice could face the heat currently registered in some of the hottest capitals in the country. So they compared this state to other states in Brazil. So why is this of interest to us? First of all, we see that these are news that are reported to citizens all over in the headlines itself. If you look at the article, this is the complete article. I copied it in small strips like this. The complete article has 1,600 words in Portuguese. This is much longer than any text that we ever give any student in any educational context to read as part of a home assignment. But this is what citizens need to read in order to understand information about global warming. And again, you do not see graphs or charts and so on, which math teachers and statistics teachers very often go to. The information is communicated through text. But let me point your attention to one more important thing here. He talks about projections, but this is not a regression. This is not a prediction in the statistical sense. It's a composite projection talking about the worst case scenario, which you should contrast with the best case scenario or with the medium or middle scenario. And this is how we do projections in population projections and in economic projections and so on. So a scenario is not the same as a prediction. It's just one of several possible predictions. And the newspaper misunderstood what is the meaning of the statistics that are being reported. So the newspaper is misleading the readers, and the readers need to know what, misleading them inadvertently, and readers need to know how to deal with it. And finally, a little example from the UK, taken from The Sun. If you are British, you know that The Sun is a tabloid appealing to the general masses, not to high, necessarily people with high education, very gossipy and so on. And this is a very recent article that appeared last week when the global death toll from the coronavirus, from COVID, hit 6 million. Which is a big number, really, really big number. Okay, so again, the whole text is on the right. It's only 400 words, which is still quite a lot. And you can see a graph at the very bottom, at the very end of the article. And what is interesting about this graph is that The Sun sticks it in every article about COVID, because this summarizes information about the evolution of the pandemic in the UK over 2 years, and it has nothing to do with the actual content of this article, and they stick it everywhere. Okay, the text itself is very different, and it talks about, and this is just the beginning 6 sentences from the article. So it talks about 6 million, which is a figure. It talks about the data source, the Johns Hopkins University, which is not in the UK, and most people would not know why it exists and what is its role or unique role. What is the meaning of death rates, how they are calculated, but they are warned that there are problems with the numbers, so they need to engage with issues regarding data quality, the inaccuracies in the data, in how they are computed, calculated, and so on and so forth. And at the end, in sentence number 6, there are references to the need to make personal decisions based on statistics. Trust the experts, understand the statistics about the efficacy of the vaccines, and get vaccinated in order to slash your risk of serious illness. So this is all very different from what we teach in regular statistics. We never really discuss much of this stuff. And finally, the graph itself, once you look at it, is multivariate. I don't have time to do an exercise. I wanted to do another breakout room exercise to discuss the graph itself. But when you look at it, it combines 2 different graphs. that show different patterns that are coordinated but separate in some way, with additional information superimposed on this. This is more rich and multifaceted than standard graphs that are produced when we teach statistics, or when we produce statistics, even when we do our own research. And so again, goes to show that statistics, civic statistics about a health issue are communicated through diverse visualization and text, and involve official statistics agencies and multiple sources of information, and so on and so forth. And through our analysis, we came up with a framework that summarizes the knowledge bases, what we call facets and tools, knowledge bases and dispositions that people need in order to be able to engage with civic statistics. And so this is a complex model. It has 11 elements, more complex than we wanted to have, but this is what we were forced to come up with. So the model starts from the top. All civic statistics start from meaning for society and policy. This is why they are collected, and this is why we care about them, and this is where they can influence our future collectively and individually. And from this, then, we move into tools and facets that relate to engagement and action, to knowledge, and to different enabling processes. We don't have time to discuss each one of them in detail. I will just mention that we need to be able to critically evaluate and reflect on the information that we receive through different channels, and we saw some examples just a moment ago. We need to have positive dispositions, believe in the numbers, believe in the importance of engaging with these kinds of statistics. We need to have knowledge about what are statistics and what are things that relate to risk, not probability, but risk. We need to understand something about models and predictions and representations, visual and graphical and tabular and so on. We need to know about how data are collected, official statistics sources of information, about indicators and things like this. And we need to have a lot of contextual knowledge about the relative size of populations, about the differences between living conditions of different groups in society, differences between different countries, and so on and so forth. We need to be able to collect more information and search for information if we receive information through a media channel that is too simplistic or insufficient for our purpose. We need to have a strong quantitative core, understand what are percents and proportions and a lot of other things. And we need to have very strong literacy and communication skills, because a lot of information is communicated through text, oral text and printed text. And so, so these are knowledge bases that need to be developed throughout the educational system and throughout adult education. And right now, we think that we are collectively doing a pretty poor job at developing these knowledge bases. We are teaching literacy, but not necessarily the literacy that appears in the newspapers. We teach statistics, but not necessarily the statistics that appear in the newspapers or on television, and so on and so forth. We do not teach anything from official statistics. And I will stop there with these examples. So if you want to learn more about the civic statistics, because you feel, rightfully, by the way, that I did not really give you a lot of information or explanations or background details, and you want to dig deeper and you want to look for teaching resources for things that you can do tomorrow morning in your classroom, there are different routes that you can follow. So let's look at the left for a moment. So first of all, you can look at the ProCivicStat website, which sits under the website of the International Association for Statistical Education. This website, the PCS website, is still undergoing some changes. I will point a couple of them in a moment. You can simply type ProCivicStat in any search engine, and you will usually come right away to this website. Second, you can try and look at some of the chapters from the PCS book. Although the book will appear from Springer, it will be priced very competitively as a textbook, not as an academic book. And we have made a great effort to try and make most of the chapters accessible unofficially as preprints. So I will explain in a moment how you can reach some of these chapters, which will give you much more up-to-date and detailed information about many of the ideas that I presented. You can look at the IASE proceedings from different conferences. There are multiple presentations about civic statistics. And you can contact me or some of my colleagues. You will see some addresses later on. So let's look at the ProCivicStat website very, very briefly, just to explain why it pays to go there. So on the right, you see a full copy of the web page itself with the logos of the different universities. It starts by saying, what is ProCivicStat? There is a tool called Civic Stat Map, which is actually a navigation instrument that enables you to find lesson plans on different civic topics. So if you are looking for a lesson plan on health issues, you go there and it will give you all the lesson plans that we have on health, on poverty, on migration, on whatever it may be. Okay. We are reorganizing some of the lesson plans and the data sets that we have made accessible also under the website itself, not through Civic Stat Map. This will come in a couple of months. We have a big call for action that is your single source that summarizes briefly a lot of ideas and provides some additional examples. And you have conceptual frameworks, a short version and a longer version, including a version in German that explains the features that we talked about and the 11 knowledge bases, tools and facets. And then you have access to specific learning resources, including a review of some dynamic visualization tools that could be used that are open source or accessible to the public. Some examples for how to construct a whole syllabus for a whole course on civic statistics and how to construct a course on civic statistics for pre-service teachers, and some workshops that some booklets that we used in different workshops that have a lot of examples, a lot of tasks that you can use in your own instruction. So here are a couple of examples. So this is a booklet from a few years ago that we used in a workshop in Berlin. So we had 14 examples there on well-being, health, voting behavior, health risks, environment, life expectancy, employment, and so on and so forth. This is the list, different types of sources of information. All of the examples are structured in the same way. So you have a little explanation on top, then you have instructions, then you have a stimulus. It might be visual, it might be textual. This is a visual stimulus from Gapminder. And then there are thinking questions at the bottom. And so these are things that you can try and adapt for your own needs. Maybe you will say, I don't like this graph, but I like the questions. Or I don't like the questions, but I can invent some better questions, but at least it will give you some ideas. Here is another example for a task that is based on reading some text, similar to the ones that I gave you today. So there are questions on top and some text to read on the bottom. Usually the texts are broken by numbers into different paragraphs, so that it's easier for learners to relate to them when they talk about what you see in paragraph 1, paragraph 2, and so on. So these are resources that you can find, and you can very quickly go through them because each one of them is just 1 page or 2 pages. And then there is the PCS book itself, which again was supposed to be out, is delayed because of some technical issues with the publisher. We are going to put all the slides on the ALM and the IASE websites, and you can then access it and see the whole table of contents of the book. But if you go into ResearchGate and you just type ProCivicStat on ResearchGate, you will come across half a dozen of these chapters already in preprint form there, and with this table of contents up there. And we put the email of the first author, the corresponding author, as part of the table of contents. This is unusual because we wanted to make this available to educators ahead of time and not wait more until the actual book comes out, and also because of cost issues, because some people will not want to buy the book. This is understandable. We don't make any money from it anyway, but you may want to find some chapters that are of interest to you. So I want to very briefly jump into some implications and recommendations. I'm going to be very brief, and sorry for the typo up there I see in the title. We are running out of time. I need to finish in 5 or 6 minutes and leave time for discussion. So I try to convince you that civic statistics is an umbrella term for statistics about important social issues that have consequences for society, for every society. Civic statistics are unique because they have some features, and we gave some examples that are different from regular statistics that we encounter when we learn statistics in formal education. And if we want to engage, if we want learners to be able to engage with civic statistics when they finish their studies, and if we want to improve the ability of adults to engage with quantitative evidence as citizens, they need to acquire tools. Some of them they have already acquired on some level through formal education. Some of them they may have on some level, but we think that there is a need to improve these tools and facets, and this is why we designed all of these activities. So there is a need to rethink the sequencing of statistical topics. You need to take some stuff out and you need to put some things in, and these are very, very hard decisions. There are dilemmas. I will mention one of them in a moment. So we think that there is a need to adopt more tasks that relate to important and meaningful context. So instead of teachers asking students to do a survey of how many miles or kilometers or yards you travel to school, or what is your favorite whatever, or what are the things that you like to do in your free time, which might be meaningful for you as a learner, but they are not meaningful for society. And so we need to change the balance of things in some way. We need to engage students with problems and with issues and with statistics about things that have consequences for society. And we think that this will improve motivation and we will improve interest in what we teach. Now, there are many calls over the last few years, especially associated with the GAISE standards, or the GAISE guidelines for assessment and instruction in statistics by the American Statistical Association. Many calls for the use of real data in the classroom. And we say real data is nice, but is not enough, because real data is, again, not necessarily about things that matter to society. And real data are always about analyzing data, but a lot of civic statistics come to you already analyzed in some way. In the newspaper, on television, through a podcast, they come to you already digested, and you need to be able to understand them, critically interpret them, ask questions, and I demonstrated some of this today. So we need to combine data and findings that are reported through different channels and diverse texts that are authentic, that relate to some stakeholders, that students need to be made a stakeholder in a task in some way. Tasks that reflect some need to know. Somebody needs to know something and needs to make a decision, and texts that encourage critical questions. And there is a dilemma, I call it a dilemma space for civic statistics. Right now, in many courses, whether it is in adult education, adult numeracy, or in introductory statistics and so on, we teach type 1 things. We teach traditional statistical topics. This is important. We need to continue and do it on some level. The question is, what percentage of the time we will allocate for the other types? For real data that are still analyzed in traditional ways, for looking at data tables that come from official statistics agencies and other sources that produce data or produce some findings that we can continue and analyze, and for analysis of text in the media, analytical reports from official statistics agencies, and so on and so forth, and have students discuss them. So discussing a text is very different than discussing the result of a regression analysis. These are two completely very different types of discussions, and each one is important by itself. And we think that if we change the balance of the different types of tasks in the classroom, we will produce graduates that are more productive, that are more ready for the 21st century workplace, and that have more soft skills and are better able to communicate themselves. I will skip this and just come to the last slide. So there are many questions that are related to research. We don't know enough about some things, and we need to know more. So first of all, we need to know more about actual practices that relate to civic statistics. Practices is a term that is now more common in adult numeracy and adult literacy. And it relates to the extent to which people actually use their skills and how they engage with everyday tasks. So the problem is that we don't know enough about actual practices of our graduates outside the classroom and how much they actually engage with civic statistics. When they come across an article that has some statistics in it, what do they do? Do they actually look at it, or do they put it aside? Do they know what questions to ask? How do they work with this? So surprisingly, we have a lot of research on what is happening inside the classroom. We have way too little research on what is happening outside the classroom. But it is the outside the classroom that we need to know more about, because this may help us to understand where we can improve our work. We need to do some more research on curricular fit, to discuss with teachers and with subject matter experts how to fit civic statistics into different types of curricula at different levels. And we need to think of adoption. By adoption, I mean that civic statistics would be, from the point of view of many educators, an innovation, something new, something that they have not thought about, they don't have enough experience with. It might be threatening for them, it might be difficult for them, they don't know exactly what to do about it, so they may put it aside. I want to share with you a personal little story on this. I was a department chair some years ago, and I wanted to introduce more civic statistics into our very own introductory statistics class in my own department. And I told my statistics instructor, I would like you to change 15% of what you do. She looked me straight in the eye and said, you need to give it to me in writing. I am not going to change anything. I am not going to take out correlations or regressions or analysis of variance or reading tables just because you told me. Everybody would laugh at me. If you want me to take something out, you need to tell me to do it and twist my arm, and then I will do it, and I will do it very well. And I would love to do it because it's important, but I cannot just throw away something that we've been teaching for 50 years. So there are very complicated issues regarding the politics of making changes in existing curricula and convincing teachers to take something out and replace it with something new. It's complicated. So we need to understand more about adoption, about the politics of curriculum design and curriculum implementation, and so on and so forth. So we have many challenges. And we need to continue and work on this. So I will stop here. I hope that I convinced you that this is at least worth some more attention, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Iddo. Thank you very much for this very interesting and enlightening presentation on civic statistics.
Can I just join Case in thanking you, Iddo, for a fascinating discussion there that's given me plenty food for thought, and I think we need to invite you back again very soon, and I think you need to come to the ALM conference in Barcelona as well to talk more about this idea.